Hi, I'm Brian Deal, Director of Strategy and Supply Chain Services at DVIRC. Over the years, I've worked with numerous manufacturers from navigating disruption to optimizing their performance. Today, I'll be answering some of the most common questions in the field. Let's dive in. Well, let's get into some questions. Let's see what we have here. Looking back at your career journey, what drew you into supply chain management and how has that field evolved since you started? Well, I might be dating myself, but when I started out, it wasn't called supply chain management. Some people use the term of production planning, production coordination, operations management. Where I got interested in was touching different parts of the supply chain, whether it be on the buy side, dealing with suppliers, dealing with customers, or pulling it together through the planning mechanisms. I started to see that there was a lot of disconnect in different parts of the organization. So I started to learn more about what was evolving as the full holistic supply chain management field. And that's where I was able to build my background and learn more about how these different disciplines connect and how to optimize them for the good of the organization. All right, we're going random. How do you approach risk management in a supply chain strategy, and has your approach changed since the global pandemic? Once the pandemic happened and we started seeing piles of ships outside of ports trying to get in and deliver goods, supply chain management was the hot topic. Some of the things that I've seen that have shifted in managing it is, coming up with an inventory strategy and also understanding your demand planning practices. From the inventory part, it's understanding the trade-off between having extra inventory to service variation of customer demand. So if you have a pulse and tools to use to understand your customer demand, you're going to be ahead of the curve. You're going to be a winner in the supply chain management challenge. All right, let's see what we have next. Besides COVID, could you describe a time when something completely unexpected about your supply chain operations materialized? In retrospect, how would you handle it today? This was a very painful experience for me. It was about halfway through my career, and we used a variety of different suppliers for coatings. And one of the suppliers we had a major fire and explosion and disruption. And ultimately, they called a force majeure event. And what we came to find out was essentially that was the one facility in their network of over 10 plants that only made that coating. So we were left to survive without any supply. We ultimately had to go abroad to get some supply. But that to me taught me a lesson of truly understanding your supply base and do they have duplication of resources and capability? Because when you learn on the fly, it's usually very painful and disruptive to not only your organization, but ultimately your customers. How are you seeing AI and machine learning transform traditional supply chain operations? What excites you the most about these technologies? Well, let me start off with the second part of this question. What gets me really looking forward to what the future will deliver is how these tools will uncover things we do not see. Where I see the transformation where it's really going to accelerate is when we're starting to connect those digital dots, whether it's IoT at the factory floor or understanding point of purchases. Once those dots get connected, we'll see a lot of value. We'll also see a lot of transformation. And those who understand it the best and can leverage it are going to be the winners. Can you share an example of when customer feedback led to a significant change in your supply chain operations? We had at the time a major name brand beverage company that unfortunately we ran them out of one of their A products. There was a couple causes to it, but we saw that the main driver was not understanding their demand profile and managing inventories appropriately. So I really encourage organizations to come up with an inventory strategy that is paired with their demand planning exercises. So whether you're doing a make to stock model, make to order, or an ABC inventory classification strategy, you got to have something. So understand the space that you play in order to support your customers best. In your experience, what's the biggest misconception people have about modern supply chain management? What are companies getting wrong? When people hear supply chain, they only look at upstream. Supply chain is top to bottom. It's from your supplier down to your customer, right? So organizations focus heavily on supplier diversity, supplier management practices, which are great, but you have to look at it holistically of what's happening within your company and then downstream to your customer. So the more you can get tied in to your customer and then build the box in your company to optimize how you produce things, the inventory you're holding, ultimately is going to make you far stronger than your competitors. What role do you see nearshoring playing in the future of global supply chains, especially given the recent geopolitical and tariff tensions? So nearshoring is cutting down the distance in which supplies are coming from. There's a lot that we see in the headlines today that companies are really grappling with. How do we handle, how do we prepare? Nearshoring, it's a reality. That's going to be happening over the next few years. Depending on the space you play in as a company, you have to realize, is that actually going to help you or hurt you? The key here is really building a longer term strategy. Don't look at your buying strategy or your inventory strategy for the next 6 to 12 months. It's really looking out in the next 3 to 5 years. So what are your options? Mapping that out, getting it on paper, and coming up with viable options and being ready to pivot when things change. How do you balance the competing demands of cost efficiency, sustainability, and resilience in today's supply chain landscape? Supply chain is really, understanding the trade-offs of different parts. You can carry all the inventory in the world to meet all the what-if scenarios of demand, but that's usually not economically viable. So organizations have to choose, a balance of inventory, production capacity, workers. It really starts with getting things down to paper and coming up with a plan to understand those costs. You have to take a holistic look and look at those trade-off costs from, top to your suppliers all the way down to your customers. All right, looking ahead, what do you think will be the biggest challenge facing supply chain professionals in the next 5 years? The combination of, volatility in supply chains, whether it's tariffs, nearshoring, transportation issues. The other aspect I think will challenge supply chain professionals is the new set of information coming from AI and things being more interconnected. I think that's going to create potentially noise. Some of it's happening today, and the challenge for supply chain professionals is going to be creating a process that funnels this information to decision-making and risk management practices that optimize the business. How does DVIRC support manufacturers with supply chain challenges? So DVIRC has a wealth of resources and folks to help out. Some of it is as basic as training, supplier scouting, or we do Supply Chain 101 just to get your team a little bit upskilled and to discover which areas you might need more help in. Sometimes that drives towards advanced supply chain training or even project work, where an organization has a specific pain point that they really want to improve in. The most common areas I see in this advanced supply chain training and facilitation is in demand planning and inventory management, supplier management or supplier scouting, and then lastly, SIOP, sales, inventory, and operations planning. Demand planning and inventory management is really understanding your downstream variation that customers are naturally going to have. I get a lot of feedback where planning or operations folks say, the forecast is always wrong, and that's always going to be the case. It's really the discussion point of how far off is the forecast. Some organizations can survive with plus or minus 10%. Some organizations can only survive with plus or minus 2%. So it's really a point of discovery and creating processes to make you better in your demand planning, which then leads into your inventory management strategy, depending on what service levels you really want or the partnership you have with your customers. The second part, supplier management, is understanding how your suppliers perform. It might even be doing the exercise of expanding your supplier base through supplier scouting. So that's trying to diversify and de-risk. And then the last part is SIOP. So SIOP stands for Sales, Inventory, and Operations Planning. Some organizations might not really focus on inventory, like if you're building 5 big machines a year, the inventory component might not be that necessary. But classically, most organizations have to be fluent in their sales function, inventory management, and operations planning. So tying all three together in a monthly cycle, similar to the accounting cycle. Most organizations each month close the books. They look at, how much money did they make last month? What's the cash flow look like? Where are they going over the next couple of months, right? That's vital to the survival of the organization. So like that, SIOP pulls together these different components to document where the organization is going in the next month, quarter, or even year. What approach to talent development should organizations take, and how do you keep teams engaged with continuous learning about supply chain? Get aligned with peers of other companies or even maybe professional organizations that are fluent on these topics. Even DVIRC, we do Supply Chain 101. We've delivered over the last 2 years. That has been probably one of the biggest hits for our organization. And that really starts to uncover for organizations or individuals where they need further upskilling. So it's really get yourself out there, get aligned with a professional organization, or find peers in companies similar to yours. What do you consider to be the most underrated skill in supply chain management that aspiring professionals should develop? This is an old school one for me. It's really developing the soft skills, communication skills, and engagement across different disciplines. You have to be comfortable speaking with people in areas that you don't have a strong knowledge base. Supply chain professionals, I really look at as kind of the glue that ties the organization together and is the quarterback. Supply chain professionals really need to upskill in engaging others across disciplines, understanding their processes, their challenges, their inputs, and synthesizing that into the holistic view of how the organization is going to function. Okay, who's doing it right and firing on all cylinders in continuous improvement in supply chain? So I think the organizations that understand how to connect the shop floor to the digital tools that are out there are going to be the winners. And additionally, it's connecting the digital tools from your customers to your organization. So the more ingrained you get upstream and downstream is ultimately going to lead to insights that you can act on. So it's all about information to drive decision-making for a better company. The ones that have developed decision-making and structure related to supply chain where they can pivot quickly. In the past, it would take executive decision-making of months or even years to move the company in a different direction. But I think the organizations that can, pivot in weeks or even, less than 3 months' time, they're going to be the ones that are able to capitalize on disruption. What are you reading right now? 2 books I recently finished. One of them's AI related and one of them's just straight up supply chain. So the supply chain one is by Peter Goodman, How the World Ran Out of Everything. And it really dives into how fragile the overall supply chain for a lot of multinational companies became, and it became obvious during the pandemic. So he really spells out how the drive for just pure efficiency overlooked risk and risk management. In retrospect, you say, well, why didn't we see it? But he really spells out the case for going forward, how organizations need to change. And then the other one is called The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman, which talks about AI and all the things that are going to change. So his background is he came from Google DeepMind. He really laid out, the opportunities and risks with AI. Organizations that ignore it are definitely going to be left behind. Understanding how you can leverage it to the advantage of your company or you as a supply chain individual is huge. Thanks for watching. Supply chain management issues are evolving every day. And at DVIRC, we're here to help you navigate those challenges. Whether it's improving your efficiency, mitigating disruption, or optimizing your supplier base, we have the tools and resources to help your company. We'd love to partner with you. So let's connect and build a more resilient future in supply chain for your company.